Okay, we're back. So what we want to do is we should look at using master pages. I think we looked at them quickly in week 1. Does anybody remember what a master page was? Most of the applications we build will probably have them. What was the purpose of a master page?
It's essentially a page that is always the same by default, and you just kind of add it into your document.
Right, in effect it's a site template. So we can create common elements like headers and footers. Rather than putting them on every page and having to include, we can create it as its own file. And that file can contain both visual elements like headers and footers. It can also contain server-side code. So if at the top, for example, of every page we want to have an authentication check, we can write that in our master page so that we can run code on the server and have it run on every page. So we should probably look at how these things work. So I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer. So what we're going to do, we'll first create a master page. We'll build another page that'll use that template, and then we'll take our default page that we've built today. Right now it has no master page. We'll change it so that it also uses our master page, and then we can just link in some basic things like we can link into the Bootstrap CDN and the jQuery CDN. We can have those things in our master page. And then what we should be able to do each week from now on is we'll basically build an application template that will already have a master page with that stuff built in. So we don't have to add in things like Bootstrap and jQuery every time. We'll start with our own template. So to make a new master page, I'll just go into my Solution Explorer over here on the right. Again, if yours has disappeared, you can get it back through the View menu, and up near the top you'll find Solution Explorer. So I'll just right-click my project. I'll choose Add. Now you may have this option here near the bottom that says Web Form with Master Page. Sorry, that's not the one you want. You want Web Forms Master Page. If you don't see it, just go to the very top and click New Item. And in this list, it's kind of down towards the bottom. We want a Web Forms Master Page. A nested one, you can actually nest master pages inside. So we can have like a parent that has certain elements that are common, but then we want a few different child themes that use part. To be honest with you, I've never used one of those. I've never felt the need to have more than one master page at a time, but if you want that level of templating, it's available. So it gets a .master extension. I'll just call this lesson 4 .master. And I'll add it to the solution and we can see what we get. So we get most of a regular HTML template, except you'll notice 2 things that are new on here. What do you see that's not standard here? It's pretty similar to a regular HTML template, but not quite. Well, whatever you see here that's different. Yeah, so there's the top line. So it declares this is a master page. It still has a C# file, so if we want to write server-side code, we still can access it. And within the HTML, there's a few new things here. No, I think that's still here. Yep, so that's actually still here on our regular web form.
We have content placeholders.
So what we've got here are these content placeholder tags. One inside the head section. So that's if we want to write dynamic content in the header, things like custom meta keywords or meta descriptions on every page, our master page will include them. So we're not stuck with things like the same metadata on every single page if we want to customize it. Also in the middle, we have this content placeholder. You have to add a new item to the project. So I'm just going to put a comment here. So this is where the main page content goes. So by default, when we create a master page, there's always one dynamic content section that they give an ID of content placeholder 1. We can have as many different dynamic content sections as we want. All we have to do is add additional ASP content placeholder tags. So typically, if we have things like headers and footers, they're typically going to go, a header will typically go above this section, and the footer's typically going to go below it. So what I'll do is let's put on a nav section at the top. So this will be part of our master page, and we can just maybe put on a couple of links. So I'll create an unordered list. And we'll put 2 links in our navigation, one that goes to the default page we've already created, and then we'll make another page called page 2, which will just have some sort of static content. So we want our nav bar to appear on every page above the actual page content. Seems like a reasonable place to put the navigation, up at the top. And down below, we'll add a footer tag. And you can just put in some text in the footer. Doesn't really matter what goes in there. Just something we can see that's going to show up below our page content. So we've got this template. We can't load the master pages on their own. If I build my solution and go back to my browser, if I try and load lesson4.master, it says the web server will deny the file extension. It can't render or generate a .master page on its own. All we can do is build an ASPX page that will use our master file. So we've got 2 links in the navigation. Here's kind of what our master page will look like. We'll have our header at the top, our content placeholder in the middle, and our footer at the bottom. So if we want to add, what we're going to do is create a new page. We'll call it page 2. But we want to set up page 2 to use this template. And then we'll want to change our default page, because our default page still just runs we still have no header and footer. So we'll want to include our master page so we get our header and footer on here. So how do we actually build a page from scratch and right from the very beginning, apply the master page to it? So we'll go to Solution Explorer. I'll select my project. I'll right-click it. I'll choose Add, New Item. And up near the top is we want, before for default we created just a standard web form that included all our HTML. This time we want web form with master page. We'll call this page 2 because that's what we're linking to in our navigation bar. And after I click Add, Visual Studio is going to prompt me and say, okay, you want this web form to use a master page. Here's a list of all the master templates in the solution. Which one do you want to use for theming this page? So when I click Add, it finds any pages with a .master extension, and it asks me to choose which master page is providing the template or the theme for this page. So now when I click OK, our page looks really different than when we created the default page without master. Right? So default, when we built it, it got the doc type, it got the head and body and form tag, and it got all of those closing tags. Our page 2, because we're using the master page, doesn't get any of that HTML. Why doesn't this page have those HTML tags?
Because the master page is already giving it to us.
Right, because this is going to pull in all of that stuff from the master page. We don't need 2 HTML tags, 2 head sections, 2 bodies, 2 forms. This is just going to live. And here's our master page file right here. So if we want to change the master page file to use so this page uses a different template, we can add another master page to our site and just change that property. So we can put in a title here. And notice it sets out by default 2 ASP content blocks. The first one with an ID of head. So anything we put here will show up inside of the head of the master page. So if we want to have custom meta tags, for example.
If we put more content placeholders in the master, would it default build more of those?
Yes. Once you choose that master page, every page that uses it, so if there's 3 content block, ASP content placeholders in the master page, any new page we create that builds it will suddenly have 3. And you'll notice this content placeholder 1 is tied to content placeholder 1. They have the same name. That's how the server knows where that content block is supposed to live. So we can just put in some static text. I'll just put in a heading here. Say this is page 2. So we could put in a paragraph, we could put in form controls, text boxes. So whatever goes in this content 2 is going to show up in here. So we'll get the header above it and the footer below. So most of the pages we build will be web forms with master pages, and they're going to look like this. So if we build our solution, and we load page 2.aspx, we get our lovely looking navigation at the top, our beautiful footer at the bottom. We can go to our default page, but our default page isn't using the theme, right? So our header and our footer disappear, and obviously I left out some text in my link. I have an item in my nav. So we can go back to the master page. Yeah, I created a link. I forgot to put some text in it. So my link should say default on page 2. So we have no styling applied, but we have this theme. So if we want to add any other additional pages in the site, we want them all to get our header and footer. We just have to each time. So we may as well go ahead and do one more.
What happens if you change the master page after you've already created it? Does it pick up the new addition?
Sure. In fact, I just did that, right? Because I had left out my text from my link. And I went back to the master page and put it in, and now my link text shows up.
Right.
So I'll add a page 3. I'll add one more. So I'll again add a new item, web form with a master page. I'll call this page 3. We'll use our master page again. I'll give it a title of page 3. And put in a heading. So now we'll want to go back to the master page and update our nav bar to add a new link here. So I can load page 3, but I haven't put a link into it yet. When this page loads, we're still going to it's going to have our header, it's going to have our footer, but we don't yet have a link in our navigation bar to let the user load this page. So
For the default, because you didn't do the use with master, does that make a difference at all, or?
yes, when I go to default, our master page doesn't apply. This is just a standalone page with no theme.
Okay.
Now we'll look at how we can change this. So the first thing we'll want to do is go back to my nav and add a link to page 3. So I think, Michelle, this is exactly what you were asking, right? Can we change the master of the page after the fact? Absolutely. In fact, we frequently do, because we add new things, and then we have to go and add additional links or other changes into our navigation bar.
It's the same as the master page inside.
So now we've got 3 links in our nav bar. When I refresh, now we get the changes, so now we can navigate around. So the one thing we're still going to do 2 other things. Right? Question?
Oh, no, I
Just scratch your head.
Are we able to pass like variables and stuff from the master page to the regular page?
Absolutely. Okay. Yep, we can do that, and we can do that back and forth. So I want to do 2 other things. We want to take our default page. We built it before we had a template, but now we want to change our default page so it also uses the master page. So what do you suppose we're going to have to do on here in order to implement the master page on this pre-existing page? For page 2 and 3, we built the master first, then we added those pages. So right from the beginning, page 2 and page 3, we're using our master, whereas default existed before the master page. So now, what will we have to do here so that it also uses the master page? Because we want the header and footer to show up here as well. You got it. So the first thing is we're going to have to link it. How did we link it on page 2 and page 3? How are they connected to the master page? Right here, we've got this master page file property. So page 2 has it, page 3 has it. Default has no master page property. So if we add in, and it can be anywhere in this first line, if we add in master page file equals, Visual Studio will automatically bring up any .master files, because we may have multiple ones, multiple templates. So if we add this property to default, we should get our header and footer. We can go back to the browser and check. So we're partway there. Content controls have to be top level or in a nested master page. What do you suppose this means? What else? Basically, it means we're going to have to do something else. It's trying to load our master page, but doesn't like how we've done it. Look carefully at the content on page 2 and page 3.
It has the content, and it also doesn't have all of the headers.
Right, so all of the actual content of our page has to live inside of ASP content blocks. And we no longer need all of this HTML. So I'm going to take out the doc type all the way down and including the form, because we have the form tag on our master page. So I'm going to delete all that stuff. So we're just going to start with our first div above our country, and then down at the bottom I'm also going to delete the end form, end body, and end HTML, because all of that stuff is in the master page already. So if we go to master, here's the end form, end body, and HTML. So we just have our content only, but our error message says it has to live inside of an ASP content block, all the dynamic content that gets embedded into the master. So just like page 2 has an ASP content, and page 3 has an ASP content for the main section, our default page now needs the ID doesn't really matter if you want to call it something like main, but this is where we have to tie it, the content placeholder. This is how we link it to a section on the master page. So our main content here is called content placeholder 1. So we have to link, and notice when we link to lesson 4, it finds the 2 content placeholders and it lets us choose which section on the master page is going to display this content. The form tag is on the master page. It's right here. The master page automatically includes it. So we don't need a form on each individual page. That's also on the master page. Yeah, that's right. So the only thing that's here is our ASP content, and we've got to move the closing tag. Notice if I leave it here, it says only content controls are allowed on a page that uses content controls. So we've got to move this closing tag to the very bottom.
How do you create a master page?
So we just right-click the solution, choose Add, New Item, Web Forms Master Page. That will create the .master. Yes, and on the content block, because it's all the ASP tags, we do need the run at equals server attribute. It won't run without it. So if I go back to the browser now and refresh, our default page now has our header and footer. So in a typical site, we're usually going to have at least one master page. Frequently, we build at least 2. If we have a private administrative area, we'll often have a different master page than we will for the public website. The public website, the master page is usually going to be more involved and have more things going on with it. So the other thing we can use the master page for, obviously, to do a common header and footer makes sense. What else would we typically want to put in our master pages so that they're shared automatically through the application?
Background and container.
Yep, we could do that. And what else will we need in order to make background and container useful? Right. So, if you can jump onto Blackboard, if you're not there. Whoops, I just need to copy this. Bear with me for a second. I thought I already done this.
What did you call the first master page?
I just called it lesson 4.master. So I am just going to dump inside of the tools and resources folder links to Bootstrap and jQuery and an optional Bootstrap theme. You don't have to use this. If you want to write your own CSS, by all means, go ahead. So if you go into Course Documents, Tools and Resources, which is the first folder, what I'm going to do is grab the 2 Bootstrap links and paste those into the header of the master page. And then I'm going to copy the JavaScript links down to the bottom, to the body of the page. So I'll grab those 2 CSS links, go back to my master page, and inside the header, I'll paste those in. If you want to download the files and have them locally, that's fine. If you want to create your own CSS file and link to that instead, that's fine. You don't have to use Bootstrap. I'll use it just for some basic theming. And I'll just link to the content delivery networks rather than downloading the files locally. So I just dumped those in my header. And then I'm going to go and grab jQuery and Bootstrap's jQuery. I'll copy those, and I'll just paste those down below my footer. And you should keep these in order. You need the main jQuery library has to be called before the Bootstrap jQuery library, because Bootstrap's JavaScript requires jQuery. So our CSS links are JavaScript links. It makes much more sense to put them in the master page, because then every new page we add will automatically inherit the CSS, the JavaScript from our master page. So now if we go back, we can see that Bootstrap's applied some of the formatting, and now we have access to the classes, etc. So we want to do things like, apply a class to the footer. And we could probably put a container around the whole thing.
Web servers configured not to list the contents of this directory.
Because you probably just went to the directory without a page name.
Oh, no.
Supply a name of the page. So if I apply a class in my footer, I just use this alert info. It gives me the 100% width, gives me the blue background color. So now every page I go to, I have that footer. We also can pretty easily change the navigation. Right, if we want to change this from a bulleted list. I never remember which, I think it's and I never remember if I want to apply this to the UL or the nav. I'll have to play around. You think to the nav? Yes. We can try that out. I think I have to apply a class to the UL as well. There's a class somewhere in here I need. I always do. Nav, bar, nav is the class we want.
Do we need a class on the nav element?
Theirs is, I don't know, we're about to find out. I don't know, I'll take that out and see. I think we do. I mean, Bootstrap does have a ton of class declarations. It's not the most efficient, necessarily. Yeah, we need that. So I'll redo that.
It's style.
Yes, it's styling it to a degree. Obviously, you don't have to use Bootstrap. You're welcome to create your own CSS file. And in fact, the nice thing in Visual Studio, if we create our own CSS, so in addition, actually we'll do that, I'll just create one. If I add a CSS file, so I'll just add a style sheet. Call it styles. We can just put in our own class. And if we want to link this into our master page, we can actually just drag and drop the tag. So I could put in any custom style into my CSS. If we go back to the master page, I can go to my Solution Explorer. I can actually just drag my style sheet in. and it writes the link tag. So now we can use a combination of whatever style sheets we want. We can add Bootstrap, we can use our own, we could use other frameworks like Foundation. I'm not quite sure why my style is not being applied. It is probably getting overwritten, although I thought if I put my style sheet first, it would override my Bootstrap theme. Apparently not. So you can do whatever you want in terms of styling. You're welcome to use your own CSS. I'll probably just link into Bootstrap in my master pages so that I can just leverage those classes that are there.
Is your, the page where you had all the input forms, once you submit, does it work?
Yep, still works. So yeah, that's a good question. So we want to go back and make sure that all this stuff is still working. So when I click here, I get my toppings label when I click my button. So all my code's still running just as before. We've really just changed the presentation. We haven't changed any of the logic or functionality whatsoever.
Using some really invalid postback or callback argument, event validation is enabled using pages enable event validation equals true in configuration, or page enable event validation equals true in page.
I'll have to come have a look, Vadim. So setting up the templates is pretty easy, and you've got full control. So now making new pages, obviously we added these pages. Making new pages is simple. We set up the master page, set up our CSS and JavaScript, then we can just go ahead and build new pages and add the functionality, our headers, footers, if we want sidebars or other things, we just put those in the master pages. Actually, you know what? We'll do one thing, other quick thing. I've hard-coded in the date here. Let's take this out, and what we'll do is we'll put on an ASP label, and we'll use server-side script to automatically print the current date and time, so that that's dynamic every time we refresh the page. So you can see how we can write server-side code on the master page as well. So I'll take that out. I'll put on an ASP label. I'll call it LBL timestamp and give it a run at equals server attribute. So every time our master page is loaded, we want to print the current date and time on this into this label. So not only can we write C# code on our individual pages like we did with our default page, but our master page has a code window as well. So if I open up lesson4.master, I can double click it. So on our page load, we want to show the current date and time in the footer. So we'll have two page load events. The master file has its own page load event, and each individual page has its own load event. So we'll set the text property of our timestamp label, and we can get the date and time straight from ASP.NET from the server. System.datetime.now. And we actually can choose our format, short or long, date or time. I'll just say toString, which will give us, should give us both the date and time. So we're converting the date to a string so we can print it out as the text property. And we'll have to compile for that change to get activated. And if you run your solution now and refresh your page, you should get both the current date and time. And every time you click a new link, that should update in your footer. So now it's giving me both the date and time, which I could format however I want. If I want only the date or only the time, we've got both toDate and toTime functions. So which page load? We said there's 2 page load events happening. Which one do you think happens first? Does the master happen first and then the page that uses it, or does the individual page first and then the master? Think the master first? Well, we can try it. This is where a debugger is useful. If I put in a breakpoint here, here's my master page, and here's my default page load. If I put in 2 breakpoints and start my debugger, we'll see which one gets hit first. So I'll start my application again, and this time my debugger's active. So first it actually hits page load on default.aspx. There's no code here. Then it hits page load on my master page. So we just have to be aware of the order, that the master page load will actually happen second. Okay. So it's not beautiful, but you can start to see how we might start putting together a real application, how all this works. In my Wednesday class, they built this. What did they build? Oh, I don't. Right, here's what they built Wednesday. So they used Bootstrap and a master page. They used one little. Oh, that's not the right one. That was what we were doing last week with a master page. We'll find it. See if I can. So this is sort of similar to what we did last week. The programmer students built this one page with a master page and Bootstrap. They built a tip calculator. So I spent $100, and here's my tip. So they just use a simple master page and Bootstrap to style it. So it's probably a good idea that we add some basic styling. So at the end of the class, you'll have a bunch of stuff in your portfolio that kind of look like mini applications.